I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the land acknowledgement. Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. The lands we know today as the Township of Centre Wellington have been home to the Indigenous people since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Centre Wellington, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Centre Wellington remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with the Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Wilton. Addendums and corrections to the agenda. None? Disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Oh. Sorry? Yeah. No. Yes. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. I will be recusing myself from 2 items in the closed session. Thank you.
Item number 5, closed session, that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington convene in closed session in accordance with Section 239E, 2E, F, and Municipal Act 2001, as amended to consider E, a litigation or potential litigation, including matters before the administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. The recommendation is that the Council Township of Centre Wellington convene in closed session in accordance with Section 239, 2E and F of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to consider E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, and F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Evo, a seconder on that. Councillor McDonald, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So we will move into closed session and we will be back up here approximately around 2 p.m. Hello, folks. We're going to back to reconvene back into open sessions. There was no matter arising from closed session. Public meetings to consider zoning amendments, none. And at this point in time, and again, I want to thank our guests for sort of waiting for us to come back. We're doing presentations and announcements, and then I'd like to introduce, I'm assuming, Barb, you're going to give us a little prelude of what's going to happen. So welcome, Barb, in terms of our Chamber Artists program here. So welcome, Barb.
Thanks. And I really appreciate the time Council always takes to let us have a moment to present to you. And we're thrilled to have Terry Copp here to present the work of his wife, Linda Copp. Linda, we lost last fall, but she was a remarkable artist who had a passion for this area. And you may or may not know it, but the work you're seeing on the walls and in the hallway are all batik. And it takes weeks and weeks to create any of these, and they're quite stunning. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Terry to come and tell you more about Linda. Terry, can you come up?
Thanks very much. First, let me thank the Elora Arts Council for this opportunity to exhibit some of Linda's work and to invite me here. Linda and I and our 3 children arrived in Wellington County a little over 50 years ago. Having left Montreal, I took up a position at Wilfrid Laurier University, taught there for many years. Linda fell in love with Elora and Wellington County from the beginning, and during the course of time, she turned her medium, the one that she chose at this stage of her life, to paint with batik, into the kind of art you can see on the wall. Batik is, of course, an Indonesian process in which you work from light to dark, waxing the lightest part as you work through, so that the final product, before it is processed, is completely covered in wax. Now, in Indonesia and in the early stages of Linda's life, you crackle the wax in order to run the colors into the previous color, dark into light, and so on. Linda did that originally when we arrived, but she, as you can tell from the art that is on display today, she increasingly became simply interested in using it as a device of painting. And there's very little crackle in the exhibits that are actually on place here. But all of them are, in fact, of our immediate area. That's the Salem view from the Salem Bridge, and the others are all related to the Elora Gorge. The Elora Gorge was the subject of 3 large exhibits that Linda had at the Wellington County Museum in the late 1990s and in the early part of this century. One was called A Year on the Grand, a second was called The Rivers of the Grand, and the third was a 3-person exhibit. Linda passed away, as was said, after a struggle with dementia last fall, and we are still very interested in exhibiting her art. And again, I thank the Elora Arts Council and you for your attention. Thank you.
Terry, do you have a comment you want to make to Councillor McDonald?
Through you, Mayor Waters, thank you so much for coming today. I know Linda was cherished, and I really think they're beautiful pieces, and I'm so proud to have them here in the chamber. And thank you for coming and telling us your story.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Terry, just before you leave, again, I'd like to thank you for coming here 50 years ago and sharing your love and your joy and through art for all our community to see. It's it's amazing how people come here and maybe you were planning to be here for a little time, but then you decided to be here for a long time. But sharing sort of the art and sort of the visuals of our community are really, really important for people to see. And I'm sad for you that Linda's not here herself today, but again, really appreciate you working with Barb and having this presented to us today. Thank you. Okay. We're going to go down to 9.2, Mayor's County Council Report, and nothing really to report. It's pretty late right now. So I will also go down now to 9.3, Councillors Committee updates, and I might hear the same, but I will look at the councillors for any updates. Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, the Victoria Seniors Committee met last Monday, and it went very well, and they were excited to have our managing director, Adam Gilmore, with us, who was talking about some projects that the township's working on, and they genuinely were very happy to be a part of those discussions and to give their input. And so I want to thank Adam for coming and doing that.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Any other updates from council? Okay, thank you for that. No delegations. Move down to item 11, consent items. Consent agenda items are considered routine in nature and are voted on collectively. However, any member of council may request one or more items be removed from the consent agenda item for a separate action. And as you can see, it's not very large today. So I'll just read the recommendation that the minutes of the council committee held June 29th, 2026 be approved for circulated. Do I have a mover on that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Adams, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Okay, we'll move down to item 12, consideration of reports. And we'll start with the heritage permit 490 Tower Street South, the Fergus. And I see Deanna coming to the lectern to speak to this. Welcome.
Through you, the report before you is with regard to a heritage permit for the designated property at 490 Tower Street South in Fergus. The owner has applied to demolish an accessory shed at the rear of the property due to its condition. Photos are appended to the report. The property also contains, and you can see them up on the screen there as well. The property also contains a 1.5-story single detached limestone Ontario farmhouse built in 1882, which will not be impacted by the demolition. As per the township's heritage permit bylaw, approval by council is required for an application for a heritage permit to demolish or remove a building or structure on property designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. Heritage Centre Wellington was consulted and recommended approval of the demolition as the shed is not an identified heritage attribute and its removal would not negatively impact the heritage value of the property. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Comments, questions from council? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. This question is actually for Tyler, I think. Thank you for the report, Deanna. I'm just trying to understand when we put things on consent versus when they're in reports, because we usually have items like this in consent and say it's a report. So just curious.
Thank you. So through the mayor, just this is actually a conversation that we've had internally about what goes on, what does not go on. It's something that I'd like to clarify in next iteration of our potential procedural bylaw, just to ensure that we can kind of clarify and give a definition to what actually is routine. Right now in our procedure bylaw, there is no definition for routine. And so I think moving forward between now and then, anything that is coming to council strictly as information would go on the consent. And then other than that, if there's a decision that needs to be made by council, we'll bring it forward in the consideration of report section.
Thank you, Tyler. I guess when some items that come for information are actually quite complex though, and would warrant quite a bit of discussion. So would that be a bit of a judgment call on which ones are information only, or just can you clarify that part, please?
Absolutely. So through the mayor, with that being said, anything that does get put onto the consent agenda, council has the ability to pull those items. And if you feel like there's more information that's warranted or discussion, by all means, it'd be up to council's discretion to pull those for further consideration.
Councillor McDonald.
To you, Mayor Waters, I want to thank you for bringing it forward. Because I love being able to read what previous history has done on these properties. And noted is Russ Spicer, a friend of mine and mentor. And so it's nice to see what he did as mayor in the past. But I agree with what you're suggesting today.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington approves Agenda Heritage Permit Application HP 2026-09 for the alterations for the designated property municipally known as 490 Tower Street South, Fergus, pursuant to Section 3.3 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990 C0.18. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Evoy, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is so moved. Thank you. We'll move down to item 12.2, naturalized gardens and vegetation maintenance. A report from Satnam. Welcome, Satnam.
Good afternoon. The purpose for this report is to seek council's approval to amend the Township of Centre Wellington Clean Yards bylaw to recognize and permit naturalized gardens under defined maintenance standards and to remove overlapping exterior yard maintenance provisions from the property standards bylaw so those matters can be addressed more clearly and efficiently through the Clean Yards bylaw. Staff are recommending that council receives this report before you and endorse the related amended bylaws. At present, the township regulates these issues through two separate but related bylaws. Like I stated, the property standards bylaw enacted under the Building Code Act, which addresses unsafe, deficient, and substandard property conditions, including some exterior maintenance matters. The Clean Yards bylaw, which is enacted under the Municipal Act, regulates exterior property conditions and yard maintenance. The amendments before council are intended to improve clarity by placing overlapping exterior yard maintenance matters in the bylaw that is best suited for them, being the Clean Yards bylaw. This review was undertaken in light of 2026 Ontario Superior Court of Justice decision in Ruck versus City of Mississauga. As outlined in this report, that decision confirmed that municipalities continue to have the authority to regulate land maintenance conditions, but it also indicated that vegetation-related rules should be clearly connected to legitimate municipal purposes such as safety, drainage, pest control, sightline preservation, and nuisance abatement rather than appearance alone. The proposed amendment is not intended to permit unmanaged yards or reduce the township's enforcement authority. Rather, it is intended to distinguish between intentionally maintained naturalized landscaping and neglected property conditions. Staff are recommending a balanced framework that recognizes that residents may choose native plantings, pollinator habitats, and other intentional non-turf landscaping while preserving the township's ability to act where vegetation creation creates real operational concerns. To support that approach, the amendment would retain the existing general maximum height requirement of 20.32 centimeters or 8 inches for weeds, grass, and ground cover, while creating specific exemption frameworks for naturalized gardens. Staff considered whether a higher threshold would be appropriate, but determined that it would be less effective in addressing safety, nuisance, property maintenance concerns. Retaining the current standard provides clear expectations for property owners, supports consistent enforcement, and reduces reliance on subjective assessment. Under this, the amendment also introduces clear definitions, including naturalized garden, invasive plant, and objective risk, to improve interpretation and enforcement. These changes are meant to give staff more objective criteria when investigating complaints and to give residents clear certainty about what is and what is not permitted. Under the proposed framework, a naturalized garden would be permitted provided it does not obstruct sidewalks, walkways, traveled roadways, or required sightlines, or interfere with drainage or contribute to standing water, obstruct access to municipal infrastructure, contain conditions that create an unsafe or nuisance condition, or include noxious weeds or invasive plants that require control. In other words, the township would continue to regulate vegetation where there is clear health, safety, drainage, access, infrastructure, or nuisance concerns. The report also explains why these changes matter from an operational perspective. In 2025, 11% of all bylaw complaints were related to overgrown grass and weeds alone. The report notes that unmanaged vegetation can contribute to reduced visibility, pest harborage, concealment of debris or hazards, drainage interference, and broader neighborhood maintenance concerns. From a policy standpoint, the proposed amendments aim to balance environmental considerations with enforceability. Intentional naturalized landscaping can provide ecological benefits, but the township must also maintain a practical and defensible framework for responding to complainants and protecting public safety. Staff are of the view that these amendments provide that balance. Finally, the report advises that there is no immediate direct financial impact associated with the proposed amendments, and that implementation, administration, and enforcement can be managed with existing staff resources. In closing, staff believe the proposed amendments improve clarity, reduce duplication between bylaws, align the township's approach with current legal guidance, and preserve the township's ability to address legitimate health, safety, drainage, infrastructure, and nuisance concerns. For these reasons, staff recommend that council receive this report and endorse the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Satnam, for that report. Comments, questions? Councillor Efoy.
To you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Satnam, for that report. It went a little quick, and I was trying to, that's okay. I'm trying to understand, does this mean, well, I didn't get the number, the percentage of all complaints, bylaw complaints that were, is it 11 or 22, did you say?
Yeah, last year we had 11% of all of our complaints for overgrown grass and weeds.
So do you anticipate this will lower those amounts of complaints? And is that the primary goal?
I can't say if it's going to lower the amount. What it does is allows us the opportunity to allow people to, one, maintain naturalized gardens, which has been identified through the Ruck versus City of Mississauga as a freedom of expression. And it allows us to have objective measures to assess whether it is a naturalized garden or whether it's unmaintained.
With the mayor's permission, that's my concern, is that people will, not take care of it and then say it's naturalized. So as long as there's a formula of some nature, then that's all I need to know, so that we can make sure that an unkept garden is not the same as a naturally kept garden, which is beautiful and serves many purposes. So thank you for clarifying.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Thank you, Satnam, for the report, and I'm really happy to see this included in, so it's more clear for homeowners as well. I'm just curious if the Clean Yards bylaw applies to building lots in town that aren't built on yet, like they're kind of vacant and waiting to be built on, because there are some of those around not really well maintained.
Clean Yards bylaw would apply to any property. Now, generally, there's discretion where there's active construction because there's reasonable grounds or there's good reason for why there might be some temporary, mess. But as long as it's maintained, and we generally work with contractors or whomever to ensure that it's moving along.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Through your Mayor Waters, when you're enforcing this bylaw, are you giving notice to the owner prior? And second question is, do you think this will cut down on staff time?
Potentially. So second half first, potentially. If every complaint requires an investigation, some may be resolved through just a conversation of the complaint. Sorry, the first half, what was that? My apologies, I don't recall what you had asked.
Are you going to give notice to residents that?
Yes. So our current practice, and it'll maintain the same for this amendment, is we generally try to knock on doors, notify people that we're there. We investigate. If they're not home, we generally leave a door knocker and then notify them, have them opportunity to speak to us, and then hopefully if we can catch them before an order is issued, they can have some say in a compliant state.
Councillor Craddock.
Thank you, through you. The report mentioned some municipalities do the no mow may exemption. I hadn't heard of that and looked into it, and it's pretty neat. Essentially, it just helps support the pollinator habitat. Is that an exemption that we would consider including in this?
That would be somewhat outside. That's more so for, I guess, taking dandelions.
Yeah,
for the most part.
essentially, you can spend the whole month without touching the lawn in any.
I don't think
regard.
this would capture it per se, because it's defined naturalized gardens.
Okay.
And there's also this, I've heard various discussions on whether dandelion pollen is good for bees or not.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. Thank you for the report. We're definitely in this season. Can you just kind of confirm for those that may be listening, if they do have a complaint, like what's the best way for them to get their complaint logged?
Sure. So there's multiple ways. We've mobilized online complaint portals through the township's website. So if you go to centrewellington.ca and scroll down to report it, there's various bylaw complaint sections within there that you can use. You can also contact us at bylaw@centrewellington.ca, or you can contact staff directly through our directory.
Any further comments or questions for Sandham? Okay, thank you for your report. I'll read the recommendation that the council will receive staff report core 2026-31 naturalized gardens and vegetation maintenance, and that council endorses the amending bylaws described in this report to amend the current clean yard bylaw and property standards bylaw. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Gradick. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is so moved. Thank you. So we'll move down to item 12.3, municipal alcohol policy. And I see Kristen coming up to speak to this. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, this presentation provides a brief overview of the proposed municipal alcohol policy and highlights the key changes included in that updated policy. Over the past 2 decades, there have been significant changes to provincial legislation, AGCO requirements, and industry best practices. While staff has adopted procedures over time, the written policy no longer reflects today's regulatory environment or the way licensed events are currently managed. This new policy provides a modern framework that better supports both community events and responsible risk management. The purpose of the new policy is to provide clear and consistent expectations for licensed events held on township property. It outlines responsibilities for event organizers and township staff, strengthens planning requirements, and standardizes how events are reviewed and managed. Overall, the policy is intended to improve consistency while ensuring licensed events continue to be delivered safely and responsibly. The most significant changes relate to public safety and risk management. The policy introduces enhanced insurance and emergency planning requirements, expands the responsibilities of event organizers, and provides staff with clear authority to respond when events are not operating safely or in compliance with the policy. It also formalizes restrictions on higher risk event types, such as stag and does, bring your own alcohol events, tailgate events, and alcohol service at youth-focused and minor sports events, many of which have already been administrative practice in recent years. The proposed policy strengthens public safety by promoting better planning before events take place, rather than responding to issues after they arise. It provides clear expectations for organizers, improves consistency across township facilities, and reduces municipal liability through a more comprehensive risk management approach. Staff also recognize that some organizations will need support adapting to the new requirements, so updated forms, guidance materials, and implementation resources will be provided before the policy takes effect.
In summary, the proposed municipal alcohol policy modernizes the township's approach to managing licensed events by reflecting current legislation, formalizing existing best practices, and strengthening public safety. Staff believe the policy strikes an appropriate balance between supporting community events and ensuring they're planned and managed responsibly. According to staff in consultation with the AGCO, recommend that Council receive report CS 2026-05, adopt the municipal alcohol policy, and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the associated bylaws. Pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. Comments, questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Thank you, Kristen, for the report. Just curious if there was any consultation with community groups and people who put on events and the different festivals throughout this process. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. So staff definitely consulted different groups through the process of the upcoming events policy, and some of that informed this as well. But this is definitely something that we did emergency services, AGCO, trying to think of who else we consulted with. Public health. Yes, those groups.
Councillor McDonald.
So I filled out a few policies in the past and AGCO forms. So if a group wanted to have a lobster fest in one of our community centers, and they would go through the application with the AGCO and any alcohol that was brought in, those vendors would fill out the SOP with the AGCO website. So is that permitted?
Through you, Mayor. So that is through our own event application, we would be flagging different things that we would need more information on and work with the organization. It would be something that would be permitted, but it would definitely need to be going through all of our processes. And the AGCO would require them to get a letter of municipal significance, which is also something that falls under community.
Yeah. So can I ask the
this is very clear, making sure that we keep the risk down and liability up, potential for liability down as well. I'm curious about things like, and maybe I'm just not grasping, like our, say, Scottish Festival or something like that, where they have their own bar on site on our, what does that look like?
Through you, Mayor, it looks very similar, especially for a group like that who has a lot of processes in place already, where when you're talking about risk and liability, that is falling on the event organizer, who is responsible for getting that SOP and executing all of the safety measures to make sure that they have the right number of people who are there staffing it, the floor supervisors, all of the bartenders, all of the different things that we've included in this policy. And that responsibility is of the event organizer. So in that specific case, not a whole lot changes, just the forms and the guidance pieces that we have put in place. We would be working with them through community development.
Okay. What happens to fees and costs for organizations? Does that change it for them at all?
Through you, Mayor, off the top of my head, there isn't anything that is changing in that respect. It is just the processes that how we get there.
Any further comments or questions for Kristen? Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receives report number CS 2026-05, Municipal Alcohol Policy, and that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a bylaw to adopt the Municipal Alcohol Policy included as an attachment to report number CS 2025-05. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Evoy, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. We'll move down to item 12.4, Confederation Park Restricted Donation Agreement, and I see Adam to speak to this.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Waters. Through you to the members of council. So a brief report here just to outline a restricted donation agreement that we have negotiated with a private donor. So this is to provide funding for the improvements to Confederation Park in line with the Confederation Park Revitalization Plan, which was presented to council late last year and endorsed. The only change to the scope of work is that the donor is interested in bringing forward some of the items from the later phases of the project into this first phase of the project, which we plan on implementing this year. So those are the end-to-end accessible pathway that was planned to be part of phase 2. We're proposing to bring that forward and have that be constructed with phase 1 this year. And a new water lookout feature, which was planned to be constructed as part of phase 3. And we're bringing that forward and proposing to design that as part of phase 1. So not constructed as part of phase 1. There's a little bit more involved in terms of permitting with the GRCA for that feature. But there's an interest in bringing that forward and having that be designed with the work we're doing right now. And the end-to-end accessible path and the future lookout feature would be named the Don Watson Trail and Lookout in honor of Don Watson, who served the town of Fergus for 42 years and retired as the works superintendent. So happy to answer any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Comments, questions? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. This is a great report. Usually around this time, we sometimes start seeing updates on projects that we might have to see delayed based on lots of different factors, and we've seen this one delayed in the past. So it's nice to see this one kind of getting back on track and having some real progress made in 2026. And I want to thank the sponsor. So it looks like our new sponsorship policy is working well. So yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And yeah, agreed. It's great news report. So it's really exciting to see something happening in Confederation Park. I just had a couple questions. The first one would be, will there be community engagement related to the design of this? Because last year, the report we received was quite conceptual in nature and there's quite a bit of details to go into it. So just curious if you could speak a little bit about the community engagement, especially right in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wilton. So through the mayor, so you'll recall as part of the revitalization plan, there was extensive community engagement at that time, which was great. That helped to form this vision and this plan that, as you say, is a bit higher level. I think that we're not, in terms of what we're proposing to implement, we're not deviating from that plan. We're bringing some items forward. Now, that said, I'm sure there'd be members of the public who'd be interested in seeing those detailed plans before things are implemented. So what I would propose is maybe we could have more of like an informed information session presenting the improvements, also having an opportunity for people to kind of have their say. But I think at this point in the project, we're kind of, we're honing in on the implementation phase. So I would say if we were to do that, it would be more of an information session than an engagement session.
Okay, thank you. I have a bit of a concern with that just because at the time, like even having the asphalt versus stone screenings and that was kind of a question mark and how much boardwalk should go in to maintain the health of the forest in there. So it might be nice if could give a little more thought to how it could have a little bit of a collaboration maybe with one of the local groups like in the neighborhoods or something like that as an example of some groups that have expertise in ecosystem management to get involved a little bit would be nice to see. So if I could give that. And then I do have another question if it's okay. sorry, I just lost it, but the invasive species removal is slated for 2026 as well. And there's quite a lot of invasive species in there between the periwinkle and the buckthorn. So I'm just curious, if you actually just went in and took it all out, the park would actually look quite bare. So it seems like a really good opportunity to work with some local groups to replant native species at the same time, and maybe a really good opportunity to do some pollinator garden pilots and examples, demonstration sites, that type of thing. And there are groups like CW Native Plants and the Fergus Horticulture Society. It'd be really interesting to see them, maybe a collaboration with the township, and it's such a significant green space in downtown Fergus. So if you could comment on whether that's a possibility or not.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wilton. So through the mayor again. Yeah, great idea. The invasive species work, we're planning on doing a lot of that work in-house with our in-house experts and labor force. So I think we can certainly reach out to some of those groups you mentioned, receive their input and see if they want to be a part of the project in some way, and either providing or determining what is planted in those areas where the invasive species are removed. So I can take that away and talk to the project team about that.
Any further comments or questions from council? Councillor Evoy.
Sorry, final question around lighting. I know there seems to be a lot of discussion, and I could use a refresher on where we landed.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Evoy. So through the mayor. So there was a lot of discussion about lighting during during the plan development and the consultation work that we did. I would say the overwhelming feedback was that people don't want that park lit. There were some that expressed an interest, but I'd say most preferred to have the park remain as more of a natural park without lighting.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receives report CS 2026-24, and that Council authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute the restricted donation agreement as outlined in report CS 2026-24. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Craddock, seconder on that. Councillor Adams. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much. We'll move down to item 12.5, 2026 fees and charges bylaw amendment. And here's the other Adam.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Waters. And through you, this report is being presented with a recommendation that Council pass an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw. The requested amendment is limited to Schedule B of the bylaw and is for the introduction of an annual retainer fee for technical rescue services introduced through new technical services agreements outlined in Report CS 2026-23, which was endorsed by Council on June 29th. So really just getting that one that was detailed in those agreements into the fees and charges bylaw, so we remain compliant with our requirements from a Municipal Act standpoint in terms of collecting and charging fees. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions the Council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Comments, questions? Seeing none from council, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington pass an amendment to the 2026 fees and charges bylaw to enact specific changes as outlined in report FIN 2026-16. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Adams, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is so moved. Thank you. We'll move down to item 12.6, Asset Management 2026 Update Report.
Thank you very much. I was just waiting for the presentation to come up and we'll get rolling. Thank you. So here today just to present a bit of an update in terms of staff progress on the 2025 asset management plan. And as you may recall, Council endorsed the Township's current asset management plan in June of 2025. And in that plan, it details the state of the Township's owned assets, some levels of service conversation, the Township's asset management strategy, the Township's financial strategies that pertains to asset management. It also touches on some monitoring continuous improvement activities and provides conclusions and recommendations. So within the township's asset management planning, it is a legislative requirement under Ontario Regulation 588-17, which stipulates that council must conduct an annual review of its asset management progress, and this review must include 3 items. They are the municipality's progress in implementing its asset management plan, any factors impeding the municipality's ability to implement its asset management plan, and a strategy to address any impeding factors. So understanding these requirements, staff have prepared a quick update, which is why I'm here today, including an update on some condition items, some level of service updates, a financial update, an update on the progress of the 2025 asset management plan recommendations, and some other areas of focus that staff are currently working on in terms of asset management maturity for the township. So start quickly with a bit of an overview on asset condition, and I'm going to go through these relatively quickly and touching on a number of the different asset classes within the township, and I'll hit on some of the salient points without going into a tremendous amount of detail, as it is available both in your council agenda package and through the report itself. So starting with roads and related assets for both paved and gravel road surfaces, general condition changes are attributed to just the general aging of our asset classes, and no new pavement condition assessments were completed in 2025. However, they are currently scheduled for 2027. So in a lot of cases, we're just seeing the general deterioration through age without a lot of additional information to kind of give a slow set in terms of our overall condition ratings, which factors in a number of different things depending on the asset class. So in addition to that, there were 3 road reconstruction projects that were completed in 2025, which contributed to the increase in paved road base condition. Next, we'll touch briefly on bridges and culverts, and there are not many dramatic changes in this category. All of these assets were not assessed in 2025. However, they are scheduled for complete assessment in 2026 as part of regular OSIM reporting. And changes in condition are largely attributed again to the aging of these structures. However, pedestrian bridge 4F in Fergus underwent a rehabilitation project that saw the condition change from very poor to good condition. And from a water and wastewater perspective, we see that overall water mains and associated assets remain in good condition. Changes in the fair and very fair or very poor reflect a higher number of water main breaks that resulted in 2025. And in the wastewater component, mains remain in good condition with many of the indicated changes attributed to ongoing CCTV inspections. And as part of that project, we're getting a more accurate assessment of the mains themselves. So rather than just relying on the age of the assets, we're getting in there with some CCTV work and getting a better indication in terms of what the actual conditions are. On the stormwater side, again, they remain in good condition. Changes reflect improved data quality with regard to in-service dates and diameter of the materials themselves. Changes also reflect ongoing CCTV inspections, as I previously alluded to, and again, providing more accurate assessment of the mains themselves, as well as confirming size and material of the mains themselves. When looking at facilities, we see a general deterioration of condition, which is attributed again to just general aging of the assets. No condition assessments were conducted in 2025, but again, scheduled for 2027 to kind of help us continue this maturation in terms of our condition assessment. When looking at vehicles on the tax-supported side, we see a general increase in condition, and this is largely attributable to ongoing replacement of aged rolling stock. And this is offset again by just the standard aging of assets. And on the water and wastewater side, overall vehicle condition remains in fair condition again, just with the aging of our and utilization of the assets themselves. With land improvements, data quality and inventory updates contributed to significant changes in this area in 2025, and staff continue to incorporate more asset data as it pertains to land improvements as it becomes available. And in this case, in 2025, a lot of the improved data coming from the Parks and Recreation Plan. When looking at machinery and equipment, tax-supported assets are seeing an increase in overall condition, again, borne by regular replacement of key assets and offset by ongoing aging and a growing inventory. On the water and wastewater side, ongoing inventory identification and classification, as well as regular replacements of aging assets, sees this category remain relatively consistent, although our data repository is becoming more reliable as it comes to the criticality of these assets. Transition briefly now to level of service. And I'll provide a pretty quick overview on this front. As you may recall, this was a significant area of change for our 2025 asset management plan update. And as part of this update, a framework was developed to establish targets for municipal operations, where some metrics were legislatively required and others were included at the discretion of the township. And again, I'll go through these fairly quickly. They are busy and there hasn't been a lot of noted changes, but where there are noted changes, I'll bring those to your attention. So in the roads category, not many updates as the assessments hadn't transpired and they are anticipated to take place in 2027. So we can see a more fulsome update around that time frame. From bridges and culverts, also relatively static from a year-to-year perspective. New inspection data is expected to be populated in 2026 with those OSIM reports, as I'd previously mentioned. No updates on the stormwater side. Again, the ongoing CCTV work will inform this a little bit better downstream. Water also remains relatively static on capacity and utilization, as well as on scope and function. However, on the quality side, we did see that in 2025, the number of breaks has increased. This largely attributable to both aging infrastructure and challenging winter conditions in the 2025 calendar year. On the wastewater side, there are a couple of things to point out. First is the increasing percent of plant flows attributable to inflow and infiltration. This is largely associated with significant spring events in March and April of 2025, with significant snowmelt and rain events. A second area of note is the number of effluent violations, which are largely driven by the quantity and quality of sewage entering the plant. And the hope is that the hiring of an environmental protection officer will help support mitigating this risk into the future. And lastly, some of the incremental betterments in the condition of assets in the wastewater facilities. Again, this is largely driven by both updated inventory identification and assessment initiatives, giving better insight into future asset management practices. On the park side, things have remained relatively stable. However, worth noting is a small trade-off between community and township-wide metrics in this particular graph. And this is largely driven by a classification change, which will help stabilize future reporting in these areas, and the increase in parks and fleet vehicles through replacement of aging rolling stock. On the indoor rec category, we see that an error was made in the 2024 calculation for indoor multi-use facility, wherein metrics were, or a value was erroneously keyed in both the 2024 measure as well as the target value. And I'll take responsibility for that one, my apologies. And this has been corrected through the 2025 update. Additionally, condition for equipment and fleet has improved with key replacements in these areas. On the cemetery's levels of service, we see impacts of utilization as well as the result of Block D opening in the Fergus Cemetery. There have been no changes in fire. Everything remains in compliance or at 100% of the target, so good values there. And in bylaw, we see an increase in call volumes in 2025. This is in part due to increased logging of parking-related matters, which was increased with staff capacity. In fleet, we see geotab being installed in more fleet vehicles as replacements take place. Additionally, 2025 saw an increase in the number of recorded fleet kilometers as staff have expanded the data collection to include parks and recreation mowers and fire vehicles. Moreover, 2025 saw an increase in plow-related activity due to adverse weather conditions driving those kilometers up. IT remains relatively static, really there just ensuring that staff have the appropriate technologies in place and are operational for use. And lastly, corporate facilities where staff continue to work toward 100% AODA compliance and operational efficiencies. So just a quick transition now to a financial update, and I know I'm going through this pretty quickly, so apologies. I'm happy to field any questions at the end. But by way of update, The 2025 Asset Management Plan had identified optimal annual funding targets to meet asset management and the level of service requirements for the township. Currently, the township is funding approximately 54% of this optimal target, and recommendations in the 2025 Asset Management Plan identified a number of initiatives to bridge the funding gap that were to be phased in over time. Now, looking at the forecast for the next couple of years, with all things being equal, we will see this phased-in funding gap growing to just north of $471,000 in terms of our inability to hit our target gap funding thresholds. So what is being contemplated on the heels of this information, with continued erosion of OSIF funding, staff need to investigate opportunities to mitigate continued reliance on external sources of funding. And I think that's kind of the telltale sign here. We can't control anything external to us. And when we have too much reliance on that, we have no control over how to fund that gap or if that gap continues to grow. So there's some other opportunities that staff are actively investigating. Those are paid parking revenues, municipal accommodation tax, and battery energy storage community benefit contributions. Each of these will be further investigated, and staff will bring forward suggestions as part of future budgets, obviously, as we get more information around those funding sources. It should be noted, however, augmenting these investigations is a support resolution that is before Council today as part of this report from the Municipal Finance Officers Association of Ontario. This would indicate Council's support of the MFOA's letter to the Ministry of Infrastructure requesting that the doubling of Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund be made permanent in advance of the allocations for the 2027 calendar year. Now, just to provide you a little bit of context, the Government of Ontario doubled the OSIF for 2021 through 2026, but has not publicly committed to maintaining this level of funding beyond this timeline. So that's what you would really be supporting by endorsing MFOA's letter, just that doubling of funding from the 2021 levels would continue into 2027 and permanently beyond that. With that said, the amount of allocations from OSIF is predicated on a calculation that we also have no control over, and it's all based on current replacement values. And we have seen a kind of a continued deterioration in our funding levels based on that calculation. So something else to be mindful of. So now I'll just touch on some progress as it pertains to the 2025 Asset Management Plan recommendations. In that plan, we had recommended 7 items, and I'll quickly provide a synopsis of the results to date of each of those. The first recommendation was to have staff closely monitor external sources of funding. This is an ongoing exercise, and staff routinely report on external versus internal sources of funding involved in the annual budget process. And this has been presented in the 2026 budget book and will continue in future years as part of the budget process. The second recommendation was to ensure that increases in OSIF funding will be dedicated to bridge, culvert, and roads-related rehabilitation and replacement needs. The 2026 budget is consistent with this approach. The third recommendation was that the OLG allocation policy be reviewed regularly with an aim to maximize funding available for asset management purposes. And the township's OLG allocation policy stipulates a contribution of 92% of funds received directed to asset management activities currently. The fourth recommendation suggested that debt payments over the 10-year capital forecast are not to exceed 15% of township's own revenues, and we are currently within this self-imposed ceiling. The fifth recommendation was that a portion of the annual taxation assessment growth is to be allocated to asset investment. The 2026 budget sees this 25% of the realized assessment growth revenue being allocated to asset investment. Thus, we're adhering to the plan recommendations. The sixth recommendation was that the township instate a 2% increase in taxation equivalent on an annual basis to provide meaningful increases in the tax-supported asset investment over time. For the purpose of 2026 budget, an increase equivalent of 1.83% was included, falling short of the 2% target in favor of minimizing the overall tax rate increase implications for the 2026 calendar year. And lastly, that the township continue to follow water and wastewater rate study recommended increases, and this practice has been supported by council when crafting the 2026 budget as well. So that, again, adhering to the plan recommendations. And lastly, I'll just provide a quick update on some of the areas of focus for staff in terms of continued asset management maturity. And staff are currently working on improvements regarding asset condition data collection, and this comes in the form of utilizing the mobile app throughout the organization to collect and log additional asset attribute data. More integration of asset condition into the risk profiles and less reliance on age as a standalone measure. This improves confidence in criticality assets in terms of the identification of those critical assets for budgeting purposes. And lastly, improvements coming with a new data governance procedure. And that was a whirlwind tour of the asset management update to this point for 2026. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Comments, questions from council? Council McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. Back to vehicles. Mm-hmm. We've approved a lot of vehicles, so I'm a little bit surprised to see the very good designation has gone down. Like we've purchased a lot of new vehicles and used ones from county, I think. But yeah, and then poor condition decreasing, very poor decreasing. The percentages, it was just a little concerning for me. Yeah. If you could explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question, Councilor Michelle. Through you, Mayor Waters. Really the deterioration curve, and you're absolutely correct. We do invest regularly in our asset and from a vehicle perspective through our replacement schedules. And a lot of that is borne by a couple of things, one of which is timing. Some of those vehicles come later in the year. So when we do our assessment in terms of condition year over year, it's a point in time. So with that, again, keeping in mind when we did our 2024 asset management plan or 2025 asset management plan update, that was predicated on 2024. The 2026 update is predicated on 2025. So those will continue to go and evolve as we progress through this and provide the annual updates. And also keeping in mind that we do have both water and wastewater supported vehicles, and they are continuing to roll through that replacement schedule process. So it's a constant loop, and we do have a fairly large fleet of vehicles. To impact meaningful change for any one category would be basically an all for naught replacement as opposed to things going through the aging process.
Any other? Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Through you. Thank you for the report and the update. I'm in support of the motion here as presented. I think having known stable what our funding support is going to be from the province, that's how we need to do our planning, and that's what asset management planning legislation is all about. We're a community that is growing, and we have been doing what we can to do our part in the housing crisis that is being talked about, but infrastructure does drive that growth. So the better roads we have and everything will attract more housing and also investment to our community. And then it's also the reverse. If we're growing and we don't have the stable funding, and it's gonna wear on our existing infrastructure. So definitely in support of that motion, and thank you for putting it together for us, Adam.
Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and thank you for the report, Adam. Just curious about the tables, like with the Parks and Rec and even fire, and that the new measures are stating, he's back on, percent of outdoor recreation equipment in poor or better condition within its service life. So that's kind of a common language, poor or better, in a number of these levels of service. And I'm just curious then if assets are in poor condition, that doesn't sound very promising. So if shouldn't we be aiming for at least fair or better, or like a slightly higher performance level of service? Can you explain that?
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. And thank you for the question, Councillor Wilton, through you, Mayor Waters. When we're establishing these targets, we have to keep in mind that we have to be able to indicate that whatever target levels of service we identify, they have to be able to be funded throughout our asset management planning. So if we were to keep everything in exceptional condition, that comes at a cost. So I think as it stands now in terms of our vehicle replacement, having everything in poor or better, poor is still very much operational and functional. functional from that perspective, but you have to define a level of service that is financially attainable and striving towards that. So if we want to increase that level of service, that would come at a financial impact to the township. So we tried to, and again, this is the first time through the 2025 Asset Management Plan update that we'd have established these targets and had to define our financing strategy to be able to facilitate those target levels of service. So with that, staff came in, I could say on a conservative level to ensure that the levels of service we identified are, one, in keeping with what we are delivering prior to establishing those levels of service frameworks, and two, are able to be funded through our existing funding streams without being unduly burdensome to our taxpayers and ratepayers.
Thank you for that. Just a clarification or comment, I guess. It still seems, is there a possibility then to do a scenario, like where scenario A is poor or better and scenario B is fair or average or better? Because I'm concerned, like parks, okay, a truck, if staff are driving around a truck that's kind of icky, that's fine. But a park in poor condition, that's not a great level of service for the community members. Whereas the one that really concerns me would be fire. If things are in poor condition and there is a safety concern and emergencies, then that seems like maybe we're putting people at risk. So I just wonder if there's possibilities within these categories to do some, like maybe not all categories, but within certain. You're smiling, so I'm guessing you've thought of this. So maybe you can explain.
Yeah, it was an excellent question, and thank you for it, Councillor Wilton. And through you, Mayor Waters, yes, that's absolutely something we're working on in terms of modeling future iterations of our asset management planning activities, is bringing these tables back to council and defining what these levels of service are and showing the financial impacts of modifying those delivered levels of service so that council has a little bit more context in terms of decision making going in the future. So it's not going to be an immediate thing that we'll be bringing back as staff, but I know we are getting close. And one of my more recent conversations with one of our integral asset management employees is this particular tool that establishes some of those variations and the trade-offs that you will see through level of service definition. Thank you.
Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. Thanks, Adam. As always, a great report. I had a couple of really quick questions. One, when we're looking, I just don't fully understand when we're looking at, say, the sidewalks. There were a couple of examples where we've addressed sidewalks that take people to where they need to go. There was a goal of 100% by 34. I don't fully understand how that's possible as things continue to devolve with time. So can you just explain briefly to me that 100% goal that we've seen on a few charts?
Yeah, certainly. Again, some of them in terms of the metrics within those levels of service are either defined through legislation predominantly on the water wastewater side. Some of them are metrics from a staff level perspective that we would like to deliver. Some of those, particularly on sidewalks, there is a target to have sidewalks available to all within reason, and I don't recall the exact wording on that particular metric, but the target would be to deliver at 100% reliability the sidewalks that are available to that community to ensure that there is an active transportation network available through a sidewalk or other mechanism.
Note, before I get to my next question, can you speak to where bike lanes fall in that? Is bike lanes road or bike lanes sidewalks?
Good question. I haven't got that answer handy. Perhaps, Adam, I'm looking to you. You seem ready to go. Thank you.
Yes, great question. And we were going through our asset inventory. We kind of were curious how we would treat them. And I recall that we might have created a separate category of asset. We have kind of paved like multi-use paths. And then we refer to those as cycle tracks, like the bike lanes that were installed on St. David Street, for example. So I recall we were in the infancy of this, but we've started kind of aggregating those different types of, whether it's sidewalk, multi-use path or cycle track into its own asset category.
And if I may, with my next question, when I looked at, I think I was looking at water mains, when we're talking about using an increased use of CCTV cameras and how that's helping us, and so our numbers are looking more favorable. Is that because it's not going to, by seeing it, it's not going to change the amount of repairs that are required? Does this mean, I'm guessing, obviously, that we'll get it before it becomes a larger cost and we're able to do an increased number of smaller repairs before we get there?
Great question, Councillor Wilton, and through you, or not Councillor Wilton, Councillor Eva, my apologies, through you, Mayor Waters. That's the precise kind of theory behind asset management planning, and by having that deviation in terms of the assessment of condition, historically, because it was underground infrastructure and we didn't have access to it, it was largely predicated on age. So once it was installed, and some of that, again, a bit of a mystery, just based on the recency of our asset management planning endeavors, we didn't have that information. So being able to actually get into the pipes and have an indication of diameter, material type, and the actual physical condition based on better data as opposed to just a deteriorating age curve, we're able to better indicate where we're at. Are we falling behind in terms of our aging or deterioration, or are we doing better than what we'd anticipated by way of deterioration? And that informs kind of future asset management expenditures in terms of life cycle management.
Which would then explain what happened on Hill Street. You wouldn't have checked that because you would have assumed that it was okay because of the pinhole or whatever that happened. So you wouldn't have checked that. My final one is a comment more than a question around taking a look at these numbers, and to Councillor Adams' point about having finite resources, and to yours, finite outside resources available to us. It occurs to me that moving forward, budgets are going to have to take an even bigger look at our asset management to make sure that it maintains.
Yeah, and thank you again for your comment. Just another one on that basis. Yeah, so that's why whenever we're looking at budget, we're talking about asset management, as the two really do go in tandem. Every year when we're going through our asset management and budgeting processes from a capital perspective, we're indicating where those critical assets are in terms of condition, risk, all that other good stuff. And that factors into what staff bring forward for council consideration, formulating the capital budget on an annual basis. So the two really do work together in lockstep.
Council, any further comments or questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And just probably a pretty quick question, but in the financial items under consideration, the other sources of funding, potential funding. So you have paid parking revenues, the MAT tax, and then the battery energy storage community benefit contribution. I'm just curious if you're thinking of it, because I believe we already kind of talked about the battery energy storage benefits being directed more to the parks, recreation, active, healthy living type of assets. Is that still what you're thinking here when you list this out, that would help with those parks and recreation and kind of community services type programs and assets? Not programs, assets.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Whitman, through you, Mayor Waters. Yeah, I think that was still the indication. I know when we brought the reserve and reserve fund policy to council, we had indicated kind of what the potential uses would be. And at that time, we alluded at staff level that we would come back with some policy around MAT, paid parking, and some of these other things in terms of how they would be allocated in terms of the funding sources and where we would direct those dollars. And the council would certainly have input into that at that time.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Adam? Thank you, Adam, for your extensive report here and bringing up council up to date on this very important topic. Obviously, not only this community is exposed, but all communities through Ontario are exposed to asset management, and as we all struggle towards dealing with this. So it's a collective issue for all 444 municipalities, and hopefully with our recommendation, we'll make it clear to the province that we need some help. So with that, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington have received report FIN 2026-015, and that Council directs staff to communicate the support resolution to the Acting Minister of Infrastructure and MPP Joseph Brzezinski. And whereas the recent municipal infrastructure funding programs by the Government of Canada and Province of Ontario have intended to prioritize growth-related or housing-enabling infrastructure projects over infrastructure renewal needs. And whereas the Government of Ontario has regulated municipal infrastructure asset management through Reg 58817 Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act 2015. And whereas the Municipal Asset Management Plans and Financial Accountability Office of Ontario have identified that municipalities have a significant state of good repair repair backlogs and renewal needs for infrastructure. And whereas the Government of Ontario doubled the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, OFSA, from $2 million a year to $4 million a year for 2021-2026, but have not publicly committed to maintaining this level of funding beyond 2026. And whereas OSIP has become a vital and an indispensable resource for municipality, assisting them in improving their asset management programs and meeting community preservation infrastructure renewal needs, and whereas increased geopolitical uncertainty is threatening the economic prosperity of Canada, Ontario, and every municipality. And whereas municipality infrastructure is a key enabler and preserver of economic prosperity. And whereas the Ontario Municipal Finance Officer Association of Ontario, MFOA, has heard from its members and their municipalities regarding the potential erosion of existing municipal infrastructure and thus service levels in light of the ongoing focus on housing enabling infrastructure by grant funding programs. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Township of Centre Wellington supports MFOA's letter to the Ontario Ministry of Infrastructure requesting that the doubling of Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund be made permanent in advance of the allocations for the 2027 calendar year, helping municipalities to continue building housing enabling infrastructure while preserving the economic value provided by existing infrastructure. Do I have a mover for that? And thanks for listening. Councillor Evoy. Seconder, Councillor Wilton, Councillor Evoy. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Now we'll move down to 12.7 Water and Wastewater Public Corporation Model, and I see our CEO, Dan Wilson, moving to the lectern. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. This report relates to a recent expression of interest that has been released by the province of Ontario for municipalities to provide potential interest into implementing water and wastewater public corporations. This is, in a sense, creating a separate corporation to operate and manage water and wastewater systems. Very similar to what we just recently went through from an economic development and tourism perspective. It is not called a municipal services corporation at this point. It's being referred to as water and wastewater public corporations. The legislation is intended to be different from establishing an MSC in that it's supposed to be legislatively more streamlined to establish a public corporation for water and wastewater. At this point, a lot of what could be implemented is subject to future discussions with the province. We know that they're advancing a legislative framework to enable the creation of these corporations, and we know that they're giving themselves authority to prescribe municipalities to set up these corporations, which means it's not going to be voluntary. There'll be a regulation establishing a list of municipalities in Ontario that must establish one of these water, wastewater public corporations. And at this point, we don't know if we're being considered on that list or not. Some of the information that we've been provided to date, we know that the water, wastewater public corporations are to remain fully publicly owned. There was a concern at one point that the province was looking at privatization of water, wastewater services. So far, their intent is to keep them publicly owned, so that's good news. We don't know at this point what happens to the standard of care that township management and council have to provide on water, wastewater quality and quantity. We don't know, does that stay with council? Does it go to the new board of directors for this corporation? Is it both? We don't know at this point. We know that existing contracts and employment and legal rights would be automatically transferred from the township to the public corporation if we were to set one up. They are asking in the expression of interest if there's interest to merge systems with neighboring municipalities. So that's something they're looking into. We don't know if development charges will continue to be a funding mechanism for water and wastewater infrastructure through this new program. This is to be determined. And they've indicated at this point that existing water and wastewater debt will not be transferred to the public corporation. It will remain with the municipality. A lot of things for us to provide feedback on. The province is inviting municipalities to register potential interest in establishing a corporation. So you're not committing to establishing one right away. But that said, as I indicated earlier, if we're regulated to do so after the legislation is finalized, then we'll have no choice. We'll have to set up one of these public corporations. Staff have had various discussions, both at a management level and with water and wastewater staff, just to provide a summary of what this expression of interest entails. We agree that it's preferable to be at the table with the province, helping guide and direct the legislation rather than waiting for what could potentially be regulated for us to follow. We have a lot of experience here at the township, not only in operating water and wastewater systems, but managing them, setting development charges, establishing municipal service corporations, and to be honest, we have a non-GTA view of how this could be implemented, which I think would be a very good welcoming voice at that table if we were to register and be part of this expression of interest. We are asking council to give us direction to respond and confirm our potential interest in implementing a water wastewater public corporation so that we're at the table to set legislation going forward. We would have a combination of management and operational staff to provide comments into the province on whatever they're recommending to implement going forward. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. Well, this is a lot of information for sure, and a lot on your plate. C.O. Wilson, can you explain how, like right now, we bill for water with Centre Wellington Hydro, how you're going to divide that part up? Because that would have to be a part of the new corporation. And then the second question is, we use these funds to fund staff in some capacity. How are you going to handle that?
Through the mayor, we currently have a service agreement with Centre Wellington Hydro to do water wastewater billing. Presumably, if that's the scenario we want to continue with in the future, the new public corporation can have a service contract with Centre Wellington Hydro. There's other avenues too. If we're eventually going to explore stormwater rates, then we'll have to look at how we levy stormwater rates as well. So that's more of an administrative way of how we bill that can be figured out as soon as we figure out who the operating entity is going to be. When it comes to staffing, the expression of interest at this point has been clear that employment rights transfer over with the public corporation, and they're going to build that into the legislation. We don't know anything more than that statement at this point, but we're wanting to be at the table so that we can help form that legislation.
Yeah, Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and thank you, Dan, for the report. Just curious if you have a sense of, as Mayor Waters just mentioned, there's 444 municipalities. Was this invitation sent to every municipality? And do you have a sense of how many are responding to the invitation to participate? And does AMO have a position on this? I haven't seen anything, but kind of came out of nowhere, it seemed. But maybe you have a little more context from that. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the mayor, it was an expression posted on the environmental registry, so every municipality has an opportunity to apply to it. We don't know at this point how many have applied. It closes, I think it's August 13th. Presumably we'll get a little bit more indication on the comments received after the August 13th date. When it comes to AMO's involvement, I know that LAS was doing a lot of work a few years ago on establishing water and wastewater municipal service corporations, and they were under a certain situation. Municipal service corporations would make sense from a water wastewater perspective, and to be honest, township staff were going to be exploring whether a water wastewater municipal service corporation would benefit us in the future at some point in the next few years. So I'm not sure if this replaces that. For example, if we're not told to set up a public corporation, can we still set up a water wastewater MSC? That's a question that I think we'd have to ask the province when we get to the table, if and when we get to the table to discuss this. Just from a municipality that's growing extensively, there could be financial incentives from a water wastewater capacity perspective to have future water wastewater debt in an MSC. So that's something that we were contemplating. And I know LAS is very much tied with AMO, so I know they were exploring how feasible it is for all municipalities to set up these MSCs.
Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up, since you mentioned the debt, I notice in this model, the debt stays with the municipality. Is that correct? And then how would that even work from a financial level? Like, since we can only have so much debt to work with and we have multiple projects across different areas of the municipality. So how does leaving the debt from water, wastewater impact the municipality's ability to do other projects? Thank you.
Thank you. And through the mayor, as staff, we have a number of questions to ask the province in this area. Are they talking about existing debt, and then all new debt can be incurred by the corporation? We're not sure at this point. We know from a debt capacity calculation right now, as Adam indicated in the previous report, we're trying to stay within 15% of township revenues. But if we take our water wastewater revenues out of the township but keep the debt there, presumably that's going to negatively impact our debt capacity. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, other than the province had said they may provide some type of concessions on debt capacity within the legislation itself. So we don't know what that means at this point.
That does seem concerning. So I guess I question then, you're saying it's better to be at the table, but I guess I am kind of concerned that there still seems like a lot of things to be worked out. So I'm just feeling a little hesitant about the whole thing, but I'll defer to hear what.
Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. Respectfully, I don't see it's not clear enough yet because it's a lot of information. I don't see the win for us. We take our water very seriously here in Centre Wellington, and in our township. I'm looking at Kyle over there smiling, and I can't fully grasp yet why we would do this and what the win is for us. And because I don't have enough information, I'm still feeling a little hesitant about giving major decisions like this over to people that may not have the same passion or compassion around our water that we do. So I'd be very reluctant to put someone at the table yet until I understood why this is being done and why we would want to do it, because I didn't get that clearly.
Through the mayor, the way we view this expression of interest, this is our one opportunity to be at the table to help form the legislation. Our other option is to stay silent, not respond to the expression of interest, let the province create the legislation without us at the table. And then if we're regulated, we have to do exactly what they put in place. That's our other option. There's a chance we're not regulated to do this, but we're a growing municipality. We're a medium-sized municipality in a growing area. In my mind, there's a chance we will be regulated to do this. So if we want to have an opinion at the table on what's in this legislation, this is our one opportunity.
No, through the mayor, what is your opinion? Because you seem to be on board with this. What is the win for the township on this? I just don't fully get that.
Through the mayor, our win here is that we can provide a non-GTA medium-sized municipality that's experiencing high growth. We can provide that opinion at the table when creating this legislation. And we don't know if other municipalities of our size and type are responding to this expression of interest. So I'd hate to have legislation that is put in place based on the opinion of only GTA municipalities, for example, and then for us have to follow it.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, I am supporting you having a seat at the table because I think getting ahead of it in the beginning, I know in advocacy it's helped in the past, but also having a voice from our area, as you've said, we're not the GTA. We're further than that. And I do think it's really important to get in there at the beginning, to give her a voice, because then however it rolls out, we can say, we were there, we said that, we did this, and we were a part of this. Whichever way the legislation goes, at least you got the minutes in there. You got to turn the mic on and you got the minutes in there. And I do think that's really important. So I will be supporting this.
I might, did you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of the same uncertainty, but I think the township staff is as well, is what I'm getting as well. So it's not about, at this point, supporting it and saying, yes, we're all in. It's just like being a different kind of voice at that table to be able to kind of provide that input. We don't know who these prescribed municipalities may or may not be. They may be just focused on the GTA and maybe we're out of this. But if they were to, I'm hearing that like it would be good to have a seat at that table and to kind of share that perspective. So I guess like for me, it's just that if you submit this expression of interest, does that somehow like lock us into something? I guess that's kind of all unknown.
Through the mayor, they're clear in their expression of interest that it's confirming potential interest in implementing a corporation. So our interpretation of that is that it's potential interest, it's not locking us in. But given that if they decide to force us to do this, we'll have no choice.
I'm just going to add something. The GRCA, we went through this process in terms of with the amalgamation question, and our strategy was we need to be there and express what our concerns were, and as a result of that, a lot of the wishes that we got at the GRC were moved forward. It's kind of a little bit of like the same process. There were groups that sort of hesitated, and their voice was not heard. And I think for us, it's again, we're not necessarily agreeing with all the things, but if you're not at the table, you're not going to even have that opportunity. And I think our CEO is quite right in the sense that we need to express those concerns and our issues in terms of our municipality, our size of municipality, because if there are bigger municipalities, they're going to get expressed. So we need to be in some way expressing our concerns, our desires, and in that regard. So, anyways, I just thought I'd throw that in. So, Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. I've just been thinking about how to reword my question because I don't think I was clear. My question isn't whether or not we should be at the table now. My question is, what do you see as the ultimate goal of this, we'll call it MSC for water, in the end? What do you think the province is? Why does the province indicate that they want us to have this? Not what is our voice in it? Why do they want us to have it?
Through the mayor, the province started this whole process with the region appeal, and they're trying to make water and wastewater operations more efficient. I believe the province feels that the cost of infrastructure like water and wastewater is a barrier to building new homes. So I think that's the root cause of all of this. And just to reiterate a little bit further, to be at the table means we can at least communicate the township's best interest in doing so.
Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Do you have any sense of timelines and when there'd be future checkpoints with council regarding this process? Thank you.
Thank you. And through the mayor, we only know at this point that the expression closes mid-August. We're not sure how long the actual consultation will take. Presumably it's sometime in the next term of council.
Any further comments or questions from council? Thank you for your very good questions. So, I will read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington directs staff to respond to the province expression of interest, confirming potential interest in implementing water and wastewater public corporation. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Welton, seconder on that. Councillor McDonald, any further comments or questions? Councillor Welton.
I'm just curious, with staff time spent on this, are you expecting it'll take up a lot of time to take staff on this project? I guess you wouldn't know probably, but.
Yeah, through the mayor, we don't know the extent of staff time at this point. We'll make sure that we keep council up to speed as we progress through.
Okay, any other further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that's so moved. Move down to item 13, bylaws. Starting with 2026-56, a bylaw to amend the bylaw 2019-65 with respect to the Clean Yards bylaw. Next, 2026-57, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2018-33 with respect to property standards bylaw. Next, 2026-58, a bylaw to adopt the municipal alcohol policy. Next, 2026-59, a bylaw to amend the 2026 fees and charges bylaw. Recommendation that bylaws 2026-56 through 2026-59 be read a first, second, and third time and passed and signed by the mayor and clerk and corporate seal affixed. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is so moved. Notice of motions. Motions where notice have been given. Confirmatory bylaw. Bylaw to confirm the actions of council recommendation that bylaw 2026-60 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held be introduced a first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor McDonald, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, so moved. Do I have a mover for adjournment?
Never adjourn, but this time I will.
Okay. Councillor Evoy, seconder on that. Councillor Adams, any further comments on adjournment? Seeing none, all those in favor, so moved. We'll see you next time.